Exodus chapter 2. We're going to read 10 verses this morning. 10 verses. And then I'm going to let you get to your Mother's Day lunch. Thank you. Do you need more? Praise the Lord. Hallelujah. I love it when we need more stuff. When we run out of stuff, it makes me so excited. Exodus chapter 2. As you're turning there, the book of Exodus contains one of the most epic and most famous stories in the whole Bible. It follows the life of a man named Moses, who was the most influential man in the entire Old Testament. Moses was the instrument that God used to deliver his chosen people, the people of Israel, out from under the oppressive bondage of the Egyptians. Thank you. There's more chocolate over here if we need more. I should have stalled more. It's okay. Hey, one more thing. If you have a mom that is not here today, we'd love for you to take one of these gifts and give it to her. We have some extras left over. Also, if you notice that there is a regular in the room who is not here today, I know a couple people like Inez and Gwen are sick. If you see somebody, a mother that is sick today, snag one, put it to the side. I'm going to trust you not to take the chocolate. And give it to them next week. I'm going to tell them what's in it. So if there's stuff missing, that's on you. I'm going to start again. Y'all ready? Here we go. One more time. Exodus chapter 2, verses 1 through 10. The book of Exodus contains one of the most epic and famous stories in the whole Bible. It follows the life of a man named Moses, who was the most influential man in the entire Old Testament. Moses was the instrument that God used to deliver his chosen people, the people of Israel, out from under the oppressive bondage of the Egyptians. The Egyptians being the world power at that time. And it's in Exodus that we see the 10 plagues in Egypt. It's in Exodus that we see the parting of the Red Sea. It's in Exodus that God gives us the 10 commandments. It's in Exodus that we see God give his people manna from heaven, bread from heaven, and the law, and the tabernacle, and the Ark of the Covenant that Indiana Jones found. It's all in the events of Exodus, and these events, they ripple far through the Old Testament into the New Testament, and they even affect our world today. But what you need to know is that all of that influence, all of that impact, all of that God-ordained destiny began with a woman. Not just any woman, a mother. As Moses, who wrote the book of Exodus, as he's telling this story, he wants you to know that none of the things in Exodus would have happened if it wasn't for his mom, who had the spiritual discernment to recognize that God was doing something. She had the wisdom to know how to prepare for it. She had the boldness to trust God with the things that she cared about most. And it's through her faith that God changed a generation, a nation. It's through her faith that God changed the world. We're starting in chapter 2 this morning, but I want to give you a little bit of review of what happened in chapter 1. Because in chapter 1, Moses introduces us to the world that he was born into. The Egyptians had enslaved the people of Israel, which was made up of 12 tribes. And under slavery, the Israelites were forced into hard labor and oppressive bondage. Brutal slavery. But in the span of only a couple generations, the Israelites, those 12 tribes, had multiplied. So much so that the Egyptians, their owners, began to worry what would happen if the slaves turned on them. If the slaves revolted, I don't know if we could hold these people back. And again, the Egyptians are the world power at the time. So the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, he made a law that every newborn or infant boy was to be killed. Specifically, they were to be taken from their family by force and thrown into the Nile River to drown. This was a state-sponsored evil. And on top of that, it was a satanic attack against God's chosen people. And when we read about these types of things, it should bring us to our knees. Because there is just as much a satanic attack happening on the children of our world today. Perhaps our children aren't being thrown into the Nile River, but there's still a targeted assault on the souls of our kids today. The enemy is attacking their minds and their identities, their purity, their attention, their influence. Our culture increasingly celebrates sexual confusion and immorality while treating biblical truth and holiness like it's old and outdated. Our culture offers comfort and distractions through high-definition screens to keep our children stupefied and pacified. Parents today have to compete with devices that are designed by billion-dollar companies whose entire goal is to keep our children addicted to that screen. Our culture often feeds children what is fast instead of what is healthy, both physically and emotionally and spiritually. Our children are forced to grow up in a world dealing with issues and temptations and confusions that even my generation didn't have to deal with. And all of it, the Bible tells us, is actually orchestrated by the devil and the forces of darkness behind the scenes. Why? Because just like the Pharaoh, Satan will always target the next generation because he fears what God could do through them. I'm going to say that again because it's big. Satan is always going to attack the next generation because he fears what God is going to do through them. I think sometimes the devil has more faith in our kids than we do. The devil has more faith in what God could do through the next generation than we do. We just pass them off because they're lazy or they're addicted or whatever we want to say. And the devil is working very hard to keep them that way because if they get loosed and they get filled with the Spirit, he's going to have a problem on his hands. So what do, parents and grandparents? What do we do, teachers, counselors? What do we do, neighbors and friends of these kids? Well, the first thing we do as Christians, the first thing we do is mourn. We grieve for the state of our world, our nation, our state, our city. Because mourning, grieving is a godly thing to do. It's a Christ-like thing to do. We love to talk about when Jesus got angry and he flipped over those tables. We love that story. Gives us an excuse to get angry sometimes. But we see far more times in the Gospels that Jesus wept. He grieved. He mourned for the state of the people around him. He would hear a story and he would just grieve. He knew that he was going to do a miracle, and yet he still grieved over it. See, it's easy to just ignore things. It's easy to just avoid certain topics or certain realities. But ignorance doesn't draw you closer to God. Mourning does. Because it's in moments of holy grief that our Heavenly Father pours his heart into our own. We love to draw closer to God through praise and worship. It's fun. It's exciting. But have you ever experienced what it's like to draw closer to God through tears? To feel his love for the lost. To experience for yourself his heart for the people who are trapped in evil. There was a man once named William Booth. And he was the leader, the founder of the Salvation Army, which at the time was a major missionary organization, went out all over the world. And one day, famous story, one day William Booth got a letter from some of his missionaries out on the field, and they were frustrated because they weren't getting anywhere. They were doing all these programs and they were instituting all these strategies, and nothing was happening. And they write this letter in frustration to William Booth explaining, look, we've tried this and this and this, but the people are still doing this, and they won't listen, and they're cold, and they're hard, and they're rude, and they're and his response was 2 words. Try tears. And what he was trying to imply there was that sometimes we need to approach these things not with strategies, not with anger, not with more force, but with having some holy grief. Beginning with tears, because it's in that moment that we align our heart with God's heart. Because he's broken over these things too. He's been grieving over the state of the world since the Garden of Eden. And so instead of rejoicing, let's spend some time grieving. The Bible says there's a time to grieve. So the first thing we do for our children and for the world around us is to allow our hearts to break. Because God's heart breaks. And the next thing we do is we read Exodus chapter 2. Verses 1 through 10. Let's get into it. As we see that in the midst of this dark time in Israel's history, a baby was born. Exodus chapter 2, verse 1. And a man of the house of Levi went out and took as a wife a daughter of Levi. Levi being one of the 12 tribes, and as you know, the founder of Blue Jeans, which really came in handy when they were stacking bricks in Egypt. That second part is not true. It was one of the 12 tribes. So these 2 people in a tribe. So the woman conceived and bore a son, which you would think would be good news. But in this time of day, that was a death sentence. And when she saw that he was a beautiful child, she hid him for 3 months. We learned in a couple verses that this woman's name is Jochebed. Jochebed. A little bit more phlegm, actually, probably is what it was, but we're going to say Jochebed. And her husband's name is Amram, but he's not important in this story. And they have a baby boy who from the moment he was born has a target, has a death sentence placed around his life. But that verse said that she saw that he was a beautiful child, so she hid him for 3 months. Now, I think that every mother thinks their child is a beautiful child. In the movie The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Quasimodo's mother thought that he was a beautiful child. Obviously, she thought it was a beautiful child, but that's not just what this means. The word for beautiful here in Hebrew is the word tov, and it means that she saw that he was special. She saw that he was exceptional, he was unique, he was valuable, like a diamond or an ancient artifact. She gave birth to him and said, this is something special. What this is telling us is that Jochebed perceived that God had a special call on her baby's life. But Pastor John, every parent thinks that God has a special call on their baby's life. Yes, good. Why? Because God has a special call on every baby's life. Right? We should feel that way. That's why the devil's trying so hard to take them out, because we need to see as Christian parents and grandparents and teachers and neighbors, we need to look at every child with spiritual eyes and see that every child is special. Every child has a call of God in their life. And it's our job to recognize and protect and nurture that call. Now, I'm not talking about your ambitions for that child. I'm not talking about your failed hopes and dreams that you're now placing on your child. I'm not talking about your child just taking over the family business because it's tradition. No, what I'm talking about is you need to see that the Lord has plans for your kids, your grandkids, your neighbors, that annoying kid in the driveway that keeps driving by your lawn and ripping up your grass. God has a plan for him. Maybe as a gardener, I don't know. For the kids that you see at church, all of them, not just yours. Look, there's a lot of things that kids do that are annoying, right? Kids are loud, and kids are selfish, and kids are grabby, and kids are sticky, and kids have no concept of personal space, and they don't understand the difference between your plate and my plate. But it's our responsibility as the people of God to look past those fleshly goggles and to see through God's eyes. What the world may see as inconvenient or annoying, we need to see as potential, as God-given gifts and talents. That stubborn and pig-headed kid that you know, maybe you have, don't look at them now, but that stubborn and pig-headed kid that you know has the potential to be a leader because he's stubborn and pig-headed. And he's not going to let the culture around him sway him or her. That child that took a hammer and hit holes in the sheetrock of your house, they might build a house one day. That child that cut up your high school diploma so that they could make you a paper snowflake is both very creative and resourceful. That child that wakes up way too early singing songs on top of their lungs might just have a spiritual gifting for music. The child that climbs from the floor, this is my child, that climbs from the floor to the counter to the microwave to get on top of the fridge to get the cookies that I hid up there is a very good problem solver. Now, what you don't know is that while he was on the microwave, he peed. There's a lot of stuff on the counter, too, that was just garbage after that point. It was probably okay, but I was not taking that risk. So you may not know exactly what God has in mind, but it's our job to recognize the patterns, the characteristics, the gifts and talents, and with a heart of faith, foster them and don't let our culture or the enemy kill the gifts that God is planting in them. Have you ever prayed for your child that God would show you what he's doing in their life. God, open my eyes to see what your plan is for them so that I can prepare them for that. Jochebed, she knew that her child was special. Every child is, but she knew this one is mine, and it's my responsibility to treat him as though he's beautiful, as though he's special. He's like a diamond. So what did she do? She hid him for 3 months from the Egyptians. Do you realize how hard it must have been to hide a baby for 3 months? Look, I know babies, and babies do 4 things. They eat, they sleep, they poop, and they cry. Oh, you've had babies too. That's good. They don't come with a mute button, although we wish they would. And somehow, by the grace of God, she hid this child from the Egyptians and her neighbors, her nosy neighbors, I'm sure, for 3 months. But, verse 3, but when she could no longer hide him, she took an ark of bulrushes for him, dabbed it with asphalt and pitch, put the child in it, and laid it in the reeds by the riverbank. She came to a point where she knew she couldn't hide him anymore. So as a Christian parent, I know what it is to want to just shelter and hide my kids away from the garbage of this world. And if I had my way, I would take my family and I would build a little house on a prairie. And I would live there with them, and we would wait out our days until we died or Jesus came back. And I would be totally happy with that, personally. But I can't do that. Not because I physically can't do that, because I've thought about it, considered it, planned it out in my head several times, but I know that that's not what the Lord wants for my family. Jesus told us, all of us, that we are the light of the world. We're a city that he has set on the hill for people to see. That we're his lamp that he's setting on the table of our homes. And you don't put a basket over the lamp and hide it. As much as you want to, you can't hide your children away from the world. Maybe for a season you can. But being a good parent isn't about sheltering them. It's about preparing them to face the world head on. Jochebed she couldn't hide him, but she could make an ark. She could make a boat. She could make a basket. See, the plan was that the Pharaoh was going to send the babies into the Nile River. Think of the Nile River like the current, the culture that we live in. And all these babies getting thrown into the culture, thrown into the world. She knew she couldn't prevent the baby from going in the river. What she could do was prepare him for the river so that the river wouldn't get in him. She made a waterproof basket. What are you doing to waterproof your children and your grandchildren? And what I mean by that is, you know that eventually you're going to have to send them out into the world. Whether it's school or work or sports or friends and neighbors or people in the community, events that they're going to see on the news. Are you working to prepare them so that even though they're in the world isn't going to get in them? Like Jesus called us to be in the world but not of the world. This means teaching them the Bible in practical ways that will engage their understanding and answer the questions that they have. Are you making your home a sanctuary where God is honored, where idols are rejected, where love is evident and the presence of God is welcomed? Are you living a life that acts as an example in the words that you say, in the ways that you love, in the purity of the things that you put in front of you, in the conduct of your character? See, one of the things that my wife Anna, who is our kids church director here, one of the things that Anna is very passionate about is equipping and resourcing parents to be godly parents. She loves kids and she loves doing kids ministry, but as we've developed in our ministry life, we've learned that her call isn't so much to kids as much as it is to parents. It's what she loves most. It's what gets her out of bed in the morning. It's what makes her stay up late at night, is she wants to pour into parents and grandparents and equip them to disciple their kids. It's one of the reasons why we have that library. If you didn't know about that, every first Sunday of the month we have a kids library downstairs, and what it is filled with discipleship material for you to do with your kids. It's either stuff training you how to be parents or stuff for you to use to train your kids how to be good disciples of Jesus Christ in ways that are fun and interactive. We also have that Right Now Media stuff, which is those orange cards in front of you. I do these with Carson almost every morning. We do this little young men's devotional where it's targeted towards him, but it brings the dad involved. It takes me 10 minutes of my time, and I get to have deep Bible time with Carson and talk about the Word of God and talk about the Lord. All these things. We want to resource you as much as we can with this stuff so that you can waterproof your children so that when they go to school, they're not going to be swayed by the world. So that when they get thrown in that current, they're not going to be swept away. You can't hide all the bad things away from them. You can teach them how to confront it, which means that you yourself also can't hide away from the world in your little house on a prairie. You have to walk through the water so that you can teach them how to swim. Jochebed prepared the best that she could. She protected him the best that she could. She prayed for him the best that she could, and then she had to let him go. Motherhood, parenthood, is really just a journey of letting go. When that baby is first born, the first thing you have to let go of is your wants and even some of your needs, right? Things like sleep and food and entertainment and your social life, gone. Goals, ambitions. In order to give them life, you have to die to yourself. It's one of the reasons why we honor mothers today is because of all the sacrifices that they did to pour into us. You also have to give up some of your preferences. You would rather not watch another episode of Paw Patrol. But you need to. You would rather not have to do laundry again. You would rather not spend your money on the 300th package of diapers. You'd rather buy a new phone. But you have a kid now. You also have to give up some of your expectations. Things like your expectation that you're actually going to show up places on time. That's out the door at this point. You have to give up plans because somebody got the stomach bug. You have to give up your expectation that you're going to have a clean and quiet home that smells like lavender. Because it ain't anymore. You got to let all these things go. And then, after you've given all that up for this child, the next thing you have to do is learn how to let go of them. Not because you don't love them, but because you love them so much that you need to place them in the hands of God. See, the greatest act of faith is trusting God with the things you love most, the things that you're most afraid to lose. Verse 3 says that she put the child in a basket and that she laid it in the reeds of the riverbank. Now, every Moses movie that I have ever seen shows Jochebed pushing the baby out into the Nile River and the basket floating down the rapids, narrowly evading the alligators and the hippopotamuses and the oars of the boats. You've seen these movies, right? And that makes a very epic movie scene, very dramatic. Oh my gosh, the baby's going to die. But that is not what the Bible just said here. She didn't push him out into the great unknown. Jochebed she laid the basket in the reeds by the riverbank. She picked a spot and put him there. And, verse 4 says, and his sister, it's Miriam, stood afar off to know what would be done with him. So Moses' sister, Miriam, she sat there in the reeds, waiting to see what was happening. She wasn't following the basket. She was parked, staring at the basket. What is Jochebed doing? Why this spot? Well, we find out that this is the location where the Egyptians would come down to the river to bathe. She parked Moses outside the Egyptian country club, knowing that some Egyptian woman was going to find him and hopefully adopt him. This is her hope. This is her prayer. She knew that he would never be safe with an Israelite family. Moses' only hope was to be with an Egyptian family. And she was willing to give up her child to another mother than to have her child killed. But she also knew that she wasn't just putting her baby in some random Egyptian's hands. She was placing her baby in God's hands. What we see in Jochebed is a mother who did everything she possibly could to protect her son, and then she trusted God for all the things she couldn't do. She wasn't lazy. She wasn't passive. And I say this because I think many Christians use faith as an excuse to do nothing. Right? We say, oh, I'm just putting it in the hands of God. And then we do nothing. Right? I'm just trusting God with my finances. I'm not going to budget or get a job or stop buying stupid things, but I'm trusting God with my finances. I'm just trusting God with my marriage. I'm not going to communicate with them or serve them or really acknowledge their presence at all, but I'm trusting God with my marriage. I'm trusting God with my health and my healing. I'm not going to diet or exercise or use medicine or go to the doctor, but I'm trusting God. I'm trusting God with my kids. I'm not going to disciple them or pray with them or monitor what they're watching or correct their behavior. I'll pretty much just let screens raise them, but I'm trusting God. That's not what faith is. Faith is not lazy. Faith is not passive. Faith is not being lazy and then calling it spirituality. Faith has hands and feet. Faith is doing everything you can and then trusting God for all the things you can't. And Miriam, she sat there waiting to see what God can do. And I know that for some of you parents and grandparents, right now you're in the read watching season of your child's life, where you're sitting there, afar off, looking through the reads of Facebook and whatever you hear through the rumor vine, and you're watching to see God, what are you going to do with my kid? God, they're trapped. They're in the current. They're in the Nile. They're stuck. And you're watching. The Bible doesn't tell us how long Miriam had to wait. It does tell us that it was worth the wait. Verse 5 says this, then the daughter of Pharaoh, the princess, shows up. She came down to bathe in the river, and her maidens walked along the riverside. And when she saw the ark among the reeds, she sent her maid to go get it. Hey, go get me that basket. And when she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby wept. This is verse 6. So she had compassion on him and said, this is one of the Hebrew children. Of all the Egyptians that could possibly have come down that day, the Pharaoh's own daughter shows up. And when she saw the baby, two things just happened. First of all, she recognized that it was a Hebrew boy. She knew what her father's order was. And so it would have been appropriate for her to just dump the basket upside down and let the baby drown. Or it would have been appropriate for her to call the guards over to get this slave child out of my presence. But she didn't. The second thing that she does is potentially facing her father's wrath. She has compassion on this baby, and she chooses to adopt him as her own. You realize what God just did there? The devil had intended to destroy Moses in the Nile, but instead it became the avenue by which the Lord saved Moses. The devil tried to use Pharaoh as an instrument of destruction, but instead God is setting up this divine appointment so that the Pharaoh's own daughter is going to adopt Moses and raise him in the Pharaoh's home, to eat from the Pharaoh's table and to be funded by the Pharaoh's treasury when the enemy tries to destroy us. It often becomes the method that God uses for our redemption. Look, many of your children right now, your children or your grandchildren are past that child stage. And they've gotten themselves into some deep waters. And it looks like the addictions of this world or the cares of this world, the influences of our culture have sunk their claws into them. And I'm here to tell you that the Lord has a habit of making the devil accidentally participate in his plan for redemption. The Lord is really good at taking what the devil meant to destroy us and work it together for not just good, but great things, kingdom things. But that's not going to happen by you trying to control everything. It's not going to happen by you nagging or arguing or badgering. It happens when you learn to let go and trust God with the people that you care about most. Because your baby, whether your baby is 10, 20, 30, 40, or 50 years old, your baby is safer in the hands of God than he is in your hands, than she is in your hands. And what you're going to find, like Jochebed found, is that when you learn to let go and trust God, God has a way of bringing them back to you. Pharaoh's daughter finds the baby, and then, verse 7, then his sister Miriam said to the Pharaoh's daughter, hey, I have an idea. Let me go get a nurse for you from the Hebrews. Because this baby obviously needs Hebrew milk. That's what this is. There's difference. Shall I go and find a nurse from the Hebrew women that she may nurse the child for you? And the Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. So Miriam went and called who? Mom, obviously. She gets her mother. Verse 9. Then the Pharaoh's daughter said to Jochebed, take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you wages. I'm going to pay you. So the woman took the child and nursed him. So not only is Moses going to live, not only is he now adopted by the princess, so he's protected, but the princess is going to now pay Jochebed to raise her own child. And by the way, the princess doesn't have her own income. She doesn't have her own fashion line going around, which means that the Pharaoh, who ordered the baby's death, is now going to be paying for the baby's daycare expenses. Because only God can make the enemy finance your blessing. Only God can turn darkness into light. Only God can turn a massacre into a miracle, or your problem into providence. But this happy moment doesn't last. It's not the end of the story, because she doesn't get to keep her son forever. Most scholars agree that it was about 5 years later that Jochebed has to give her son back to the Egyptian princess. Verse 10 says this, and the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. So she called his name Moses, saying, because I drew him out of the water. Again, parenthood is a journey of learning to let go. The Bible tells us that parenting is not about ownership, it's about stewardship. Your child does not belong to you. It belongs to God. And it's your calling, your God-given mission to steward them, to protect them and invest into them and pour into them and train them and pray for them and with them and to teach them and equip them and embolden them and then give them back to the Lord. See, Jochebed only had 5 years with her son. But you know what she did in those 5 years? She stewarded Moses. She taught him, she prayed with him, she introduced him to the Lord. How do we know this? Because he spends 5 years with his mother, with his Israelite family, his Hebrew family. And then he spends the rest of his adolescence and his young adulthood all with the Egyptians, living with the Pharaoh, eating his food, sitting in the Egyptian temples, learning about the gods, the Egyptian gods, being taught in their schools, being dressed like an Egyptian, speaking like an Egyptian, walking like an Egyptian, living like an Egyptian. And at the age of 40, which is the next time we see Moses, at the age of 40, Moses is still clinging to his Israelite, his Jewish roots. 5 years with his mother, 35 years with the Egyptians and all that they had to offer. And when the time came for him to choose, he chose the people of God. We read in the next couple passages that he came across, as a prince in Egypt, he came across an Egyptian beating on an Israelite slave, which was normal. And he is so filled of rage and the courage to defend his countrymen that he kills the Egyptian to side with the Israelites. He gives up his home in the palace. He gives up his position with the royal family. He gives up his comforts with his colleagues and his fortune. He trades it all to become the deliverer of the people that he was born into. And I share all this with you to remind you not to underestimate the power of your influence, moms and dads, especially in those early years. 5 years, which most of it he probably didn't even remember. He's a baby. But that was enough to carry him through the rest of his life. Look, you can't control your children. I've tried. You can't. You can't control their friends. You can't control the school and the influence that they have on them, the world that's going on all around them, but you can control your influence over them. You can be the voice of truth and love in their life. And when you give them that, when you show them what real living is, then even when they become a prodigal, even when they are engulfed in the garbage of this world, they'll be anchored in the light that they saw in you. And you may not know it, you may not see it, it may take decades. But deep down, the seeds are there and they're planted. And in the Lord's timing, He will water those seeds and bring about a harvest that you cannot even imagine. When Jochebed saw her newborn child, she believed that he was special. But she had no idea how special he really was, or what God was going to do through him. All because she prepared him, she protected him, she poured into him. And when the time was right, she let him go and trusted God to guide his life. And that's where we get Moses from. I'm going to invite the worship team to come on up and our altar team to come on down.